I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Brenda Richardson standing at the end of my dock with a clipboard, her perfectly manicured finger stabbing at my pontoon boat like it had personally offended her entire bloodline. My name is Keith Paulson, and I had just finished my morning coffee when I spotted her through the kitchen window of my lakefront home in Lake Norman, North Carolina. The sun was barely up, casting orange streaks across the water, and there she was in her pristine white tennis outfit, visor perfectly positioned, examining my boat with the intensity of a bomb squad technician. Brenda had been the president of our Shoreline Estates HOA for 3 years, and in that time, she had made it her personal mission to transform our quiet lakeside community into something that resembled a military installation more than a neighborhood. I grabbed my keys and headed outside, my bare feet slapping against the wooden planks of the dock as I approached her. The morning air was cool and mist still hung over the water in wispy patches. "Can I help you with something, Brenda?" I called out as I got closer. She turned to face me, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and disdain that I had come to recognize as her signature look. "Keith, good morning. I was just documenting this abandoned vessel on your property." "Abandoned?" I stopped a few feet away from her, genuinely confused. "That's my pontoon. I use it every weekend. According to HOA regulations section 7.4, any watercraft that remains stationary for more than 14 consecutive days without visible use is considered abandoned and subject to removal." She held up her clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments. I felt my jaw tighten. "Brenda, I literally took that boat out last Saturday. 5 days ago, I had my brother and his kids on it. We went fishing up by the Morrison Marina. I have no record of that." She made a note on her clipboard, her pen scratching loudly in the quiet morning. "And regardless, the vessel shows signs of neglect. There's algae forming on the hull and the cover appears weathered. It's a boat on a lake. There's going to be some algae, and the cover is 2 months old. I'm afraid I'll need to file a formal complaint with the county. Abandoned vessels are a hazard and an eyesore. I'm sure you understand." She smiled that thin, tight smile that never reached her eyes. "You're not filing anything. That boat is registered, insured, and actively used. This is harassment, Brenda. This is community standards enforcement, Keith. Perhaps if you attended the HOA meetings, you'd be more familiar with the rules we all agreed to follow." She turned and started walking back toward the shore, her tennis shoes squeaking slightly on the damp wood. "I never agreed to any of this nonsense," I called after her, but she just waved a dismissive hand without turning around. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my pontoon boat. It was a nice 22-footer, nothing fancy but perfect for lazy afternoons on the lake. I had bought it 2 years ago after my divorce was finalized, a small gift to myself to start enjoying life again. The blue and white pontoon bobbed gently in the water, securely tied to my dock with proper marine rope. There was nothing abandoned about it. I walked over and ran my hand along the aluminum railing. Sure, there was a bit of algae near the waterline, but that was normal for any boat that stayed in the water. The cover was secure and in good condition. Everything was exactly as it should be. When I got back to the house, I immediately called my neighbor, Tom Henderson, who lived 3 houses down. Tom had been dealing with Brenda's nonsense for even longer than I had. "She did what?" Tom's voice crackled through the phone, a mix of disbelief and dark amusement. "Said my boat is abandoned. Threatened to report it to the county. That woman is unbelievable. Last month she tried to fine me because my dock lights were the wrong shade of white. Apparently they needed to be warm white, not cool white. I didn't even know there was a difference until she showed up with a color temperature meter." "A meter? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Cost me $400 to replace perfectly good lights because they were 500 Kelvin off from the HOA standards." I leaned against my kitchen counter, frustration building in my chest. "There has got to be something we can do about her. Good luck with that. She's got 3 of her friends on the HOA board. They vote as a block on everything. The rest of the neighborhood is either too scared to challenge her or too apathetic to care." After hanging up with Tom, I dug out my copy of the HOA bylaws from the filing cabinet in my office. The document was 73 pages long, written in the kind of dense legal language that made my eyes cross. I found section 7.4 that Brenda had mentioned. It did technically say that vessels stationary for 14 consecutive days could be considered abandoned. But there was a whole process involved, including written notice, opportunity to respond, and a board vote. Brenda had done none of that. I decided to document everything. I went back outside with my phone and took photos of the boat from every angle, making sure to capture the current registration sticker on the hull and the clearly maintained condition of everything. I even took a video walking around the entire dock, narrating the date and time. That evening, I got an email from Brenda with the subject line, "Official HOA Violation Notice." My blood pressure spiked before I even opened it. The email was formatted like a legal document, complete with numbered paragraphs and citations. She claimed that my pontoon boat constituted a violation of multiple HOA regulations, including the Abandoned Vessel Clause, dock aesthetic standards, and something called Maintained Appearance requirements. She demanded that I either remove the boat from the property within 10 days or face daily fines of $100. I immediately typed out a response, keeping my tone as professional as I could manage while internally screaming. I explained that the boat was actively used, properly registered and maintained, and that her claim of abandonment was factually incorrect. I attached the photos I had taken earlier in the day and requested that the matter be dismissed. Her response came back in less than an hour. Your objection has been noted and will be reviewed by the board at our next meeting on the 15th. Until that time, the violation notice stands. Fines will begin accruing on the 11th day if the vessel has not been removed. The 15th was 3 weeks away. The 10 days she had given me would expire before the board even met to discuss it. It was a deliberate trap. I spent the next few days fuming but trying to go about my normal routine. I worked from home as a software consultant, which usually meant I could enjoy the peaceful lake view from my office window. But now every time I looked outside, I just got angry thinking about Brenda's manufactured crisis. On Thursday morning, I decided to take the pontoon out, partly because I needed to clear my head, and partly to document that the boat was being actively used. I grabbed a cooler with some drinks and sandwiches, untied the boat, and fired up the engine. It started smoothly, purring to life exactly as it should. I spent a few hours cruising around the lake, waving to other boaters and enjoying the warm May sunshine. Lake Norman was beautiful this time of year, with the water sparkling and the tree-lined shores lush and green. This was exactly why I had bought a house here in the first place. When I returned and tied up at my dock around 2 in the afternoon, I noticed something odd. There was a small orange sticker on one of the pontoon's railings that hadn't been there before. I peeled it off and felt my stomach drop. It was a county property tag with a case number and a notice that the vessel had been reported as abandoned and was subject to removal. Brenda had actually done it. She had called the county. I immediately got on the phone with the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, the agency that handled abandoned property complaints. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got through to a deputy named Mike Chen who was handling the case. Yes, sir. We received a report on May 9th about an abandoned pontoon boat at your address, Deputy Chen said, his voice professionally neutral. The complainant stated that the vessel had been sitting unused for several weeks and appeared to be derelict. Deputy, that's completely false. I just took the boat out today. I take it out regularly. It's registered and maintained. This is a personal dispute with my HOA president, and she's wasting your department's time. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Do you have proof of active use? I have registration papers, insurance, photos from this morning before I took it out, and I'm sure there are time-stamped GPS records from my phone that show I was on the lake today. Okay, that's helpful. Can you email those to me? Let me give you my address. He rattled off an email address, and I quickly wrote it down. I'll review what you send and compare it to the complaint. If everything checks out, I'll close the case and remove the tag.
Thank you, Deputy. I really appreciate it. No problem.
And Mr. Paulson, if this is a personal dispute, you might want to consider documenting everything. These HOA situations can get messy. His words proved prophetic faster than I could have imagined. I spent that evening compiling everything into a detailed email for Deputy Chen. Photos, registration documents, insurance papers, even a screenshot from my fitness tracking app that showed my location data from the lake that morning. I sent it all off and felt a small measure of relief that at least the county would see through Brenda's nonsense. The next morning, Friday, I woke up to find my dock gate open. I always kept it locked with a simple combination lock, both for insurance purposes and to prevent random people from wandering onto my private dock. But now it hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. My first thought was that maybe I had forgotten to lock it after taking the boat out yesterday, but I distinctly remembered securing it. I walked down to check on the pontoon and immediately noticed that the boat cover had been loosened on one side. Not removed, just loosened enough that it was flapping in the wind. Someone had been on my dock. Someone had messed with my boat. I secured the cover and relocked the gate, but an uneasy feeling settled in my gut. I went back inside and reviewed the footage from my home security camera. I had a single camera mounted under the eave of my house that covered the backyard and had a partial view of the dock. The angle was not great, but it was better than nothing. I scrolled through the footage from the previous evening. Around 7:15, just as the sun was setting, I saw a figure walk down toward the dock. The person was too far away and the lighting too dim to make out clearly, but they appeared to be wearing dark clothing. They spent maybe 3 or 4 minutes at the dock and then left. I enhanced the footage as much as my basic security software would allow, but I could not get a clear identification. The person's build suggested it might be a woman, but I could not be certain. I called Tom again. Has anyone else been having problems with stuff being messed with? What do you mean? I explained about the open gate and the loosened cover. Tom was quiet for a moment before responding. Actually, yeah. 2 weeks ago, someone let all the air out of my dock box cushions. I thought it was just kids being stupid, but now I'm wondering. And the Martins across the way found their kayak paddles in their yard instead of in their dock box where they left them. This is insane. You think it's Brenda? I wouldn't put it past her, but I don't know why she'd bother. What does she gain from messing with your boat cover? That was a good question, and I did not have a good answer. Maybe she was trying to make the boat actually look abandoned or neglected. It seemed petty even for her, but then again, pettiness was kind of her specialty. I upgraded my security that weekend, installing 2 additional cameras with better night vision and positioning. One covered the dock directly, and one covered the side yard path that led down to the water. If anyone came back, I would get clear footage. The HOA board meeting was still over a week away, but I started preparing my case. I printed out all my documentation, organized it into a folder, and even typed up a formal statement explaining the situation. I was not going to let Brenda steamroll me with manufactured violations and false reports. On Tuesday, I got an email from Deputy Chen. The case had been closed. He had reviewed my documentation, confirmed that the boat was actively used and properly maintained, and removed the abandoned property designation. He also noted in his report that the initial complaint appeared to be unfounded and potentially malicious. I forwarded that email to Brenda immediately with a simple message. As you can see, the county has dismissed your false claim about my boat. I expect the HOA violation notice to be withdrawn. Her response came an hour later. The county's determination does not affect HOA enforcement. The board will still review the matter at the scheduled meeting. I wanted to throw my computer across the room. That night, my new cameras caught something interesting. At 11:47, a figure approached my dock. This time, with the upgraded night vision, I could see clearly. It was Brenda Richardson. She was wearing dark yoga pants and a dark hoodie, but there was no mistaking her face or her distinctive walk. I watched the footage in real time on my phone from my bedroom. She looked around carefully before opening my dock gate. She must have watched me enter the combination at some point, or maybe it was just an easy code to guess. She walked down to the pontoon and spent several minutes doing something. The angle made it hard to see exactly what, but she appeared to be taking photos with her phone. After about 7 minutes, she left, carefully closing the gate behind her. I was livid. This was trespassing, clear as day. I downloaded the footage immediately, backed it up to 3 different locations, and tried to calm down enough to think rationally about what to do next. In the morning, I went down to check the boat. Everything appeared normal at first glance, but then I noticed that one of the drain plugs on the pontoon had been loosened. Not removed completely, but loosened enough that water could slowly seep in. If I had not noticed it, the pontoon could have taken on water and sunk, or at least sustained damage that crossed a line from harassment into actual sabotage. I tightened the plug and added it to my growing documentation file. I now had video evidence of Brenda trespassing on my property and apparently tampering with my boat in a way that could have caused significant damage. I called Deputy Chen again. This time, I explained the entire situation in detail: the HOA dispute, the false abandoned boat report, and now the trespassing and tampering. I offered to send him the security footage. Mr. Paulson, I'm going to be honest with you. This has moved beyond a simple property dispute. What you're describing could be criminal trespass and vandalism. I think you need to file a formal report. Can you come down to the station? An hour later, I was sitting in the Davidson County Sheriff's Office in Lexington, North Carolina, going through everything with Deputy Chen and another officer, a sergeant named Lisa Kowalski. I showed them the video footage on my laptop. They watched it twice, taking notes. That's definitely trespassing, Sergeant Kowalski said, leaning back in her chair. And if she tampered with the drain plug, that could be vandalism or even reckless endangerment, depending on how the DA wants to look at it. But I have to ask, why would your HOA president do this? Because she's obsessed with control, I said. She wants to force me to remove my boat, and when I pushed back, she escalated. I think she loosened the plug trying to make the boat look neglected, or to create actual damage that would support her claim. Deputy Chen pulled up something on his computer. Brenda Richardson. We actually have a few other reports mentioning her name. Noise complaints she filed against neighbors, disputes about property boundaries, couple of calls about her confronting people in the neighborhood. Nothing criminal, but it paints a picture. What do you want to do here, Mr. Paulson? Sergeant Kowalski asked. We can go talk to her, issue a warning, or you can press charges, and we'll move forward with that. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to just scare her into backing off. But another part of me knew that someone who would sneak onto my property at midnight and tamper with my boat was not going to stop unless there were real consequences. I want to press charges, I said. I want this on record. She filed a false report with your department, she trespassed on my property, and she tampered with my boat in a way that could have caused it to sink. Those are crimes." Sergeant Kowalski nodded. "Okay, we'll need you to sign a formal complaint, and I want to get a copy of that video footage. We'll go talk to Miss Richardson today." I left the sheriff's office feeling a mix of vindication and anxiety. This was about to blow up into something much bigger than an HOA dispute, but Brenda had pushed it there, not me. I went home and tried to work, but I could not focus. Around 3 that afternoon, I saw a sheriff's cruiser pull up to Brenda's house, which was just 4 houses down from mine on the same side of the lake. 2 deputies got out and went to her door. I watched from my window as they spoke with her on her front porch for about 20 minutes. Even from a distance, I could see Brenda's animated gestures and agitated body language. When the deputies left, she stood on her porch, staring in the direction of my house. Even from 4 houses away, I could feel the anger radiating off her. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local, I answered. "Keith Paulson?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "Yes, this is Margaret Whitfield. I'm on the HOA board with Brenda. I just got a very concerning call from her saying that you've made false accusations and that you're harassing her. She's talking about emergency board action to fine you and possibly pursue legal action. I wanted to hear your side before the board does anything rash." I liked Margaret. She was one of the reasonable people on the board, a retired teacher who actually cared about the community rather than just enforcing arbitrary rules. I spent the next 30 minutes explaining everything from the beginning, including the security footage and the false abandoned boat report. Margaret listened without interrupting, then let out a long sigh. "Keith, I had no idea it had gotten this far. Brenda told the board that you were being belligerent about a legitimate violation. She made it sound like you were the problem. She never mentioned going onto your property or any of this other stuff." "Margaret, I have video of her trespassing and tampering with my boat. The sheriff's office has seen it. They're investigating her now." "Oh my God, Keith, I'm so sorry. Some of us on the board have been concerned about Brenda's approach for a while now, but she's very persuasive, and frankly, most people don't want to deal with the conflict of challenging her. But this is beyond the pale. What happens now?" "I need to talk to the other board members. The reasonable ones, anyway. We may need to call an emergency meeting. Brenda can't be allowed to use her HOA position to pursue personal vendettas. That's not what we're here for." After I hung up with Margaret, I felt a little better. At least not everyone in the HOA leadership was on Brenda's side. But I also knew that Brenda was not going to take this lying down. Sure enough, that evening I received an email from the HOA with Brenda's name in the from field. The subject line was "Immediate suspension of lake access privileges." The email claimed that due to my threatening behavior toward an HOA board member and my false accusations designed to intimidate community leadership, my lake access privileges were being immediately suspended pending a full board review. I was ordered to remove my pontoon boat from the community dock space within 48 hours. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking with anger. This was retaliation, pure and simple, and it was also probably illegal. I forwarded the email to Margaret, to my lawyer friend Darren, who had helped me with my divorce, and to Deputy Chen at the sheriff's office. Then I sat down and wrote a response to Brenda, copying all board members. "Brenda, I have made no false accusations. I have video evidence of you trespassing on my property and tampering with my boat. This evidence has been provided to the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, and they are conducting an investigation. Your attempt to suspend my lake access in retaliation for reporting your criminal activity is itself likely illegal. I will not be removing my boat. If you or anyone acting on behalf of the HOA attempts to remove it or interfere with my property in any way, I will pursue immediate legal action. Furthermore, I am formally requesting that you recuse yourself from any HOA decisions involving my property given your personal bias and ongoing legal issues." I sat there for a moment with my finger hovering over the send button, then pressed it. No going back now. My lawyer friend Darren called me within the hour. "Keith, buddy, you've got yourself a situation here. Tell me about it." "Okay, so the good news is that she's absolutely in the wrong. HOA boards can't retaliate against members for reporting crimes. That's a clear violation of your rights. The bad news is that HOA disputes can get expensive and drawn out, even when you're in the right. What should I do?" "Document everything, which you're already doing. Don't remove the boat. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter to the HOA on your behalf, making it clear that any retaliation will result in immediate legal action. And I'm going to CC the other board members so they know what Brenda's doing could expose the entire HOA to liability. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate it. No problem. And Keith, be careful. People like this, when they're cornered, they can escalate in unpredictable ways." His warning echoed in my mind as I went to bed that night. I kept my phone on the nightstand with the security camera app open, checking it periodically. Around 2 in the morning, I was proven right to be paranoid. The motion sensor alert went off on my phone. I grabbed it and saw a figure approaching my dock again, but this time it was not Brenda. It was a man I did not recognize, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a baseball cap and dark clothes. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. On the screen, I watched as the man walked down to my dock and started examining the gate lock. He pulled something from his pocket and started working on it. I dialed the sheriff's office emergency line. "This is Keith Paulson at 427 Lakeshore Drive. There's an intruder on my dock right now trying to break the lock. I need someone here immediately." "Officers are on the way, sir. Are you in a safe location?" "I'm inside my house. I can see him on my security camera. Stay inside and keep watching. Let me know if he approaches the house." I kept my eyes glued to the phone screen. The man got the lock open and walked down to the pontoon. He had some kind of tool in his hand, maybe bolt cutters or a hacksaw. He started cutting the mooring lines. "He's cutting the ropes holding my boat," I told the dispatcher, my heart pounding. "He's trying to set it adrift. Officers are 3 minutes away. Stay on the line." I watched helplessly as the man cut through the first rope and moved to the second. The pontoon was starting to drift away from the dock, still held by one remaining line. He was working on cutting that when I saw flashing blue lights reflecting off the water, the man dropped his tools and ran. He sprinted up the dock and across my yard, disappearing into the darkness between houses. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, one in my driveway and one on the street. Deputies jumped out and gave chase in the direction the man had fled. I ran outside to meet the deputy who had stayed behind, a young officer named Travis Blake. "He cut the boat loose. I need to secure it before it drifts away. Go ahead, but stay in sight. Let me know if you see anything suspicious." I ran down to the dock. The pontoon had drifted about 10 feet away and was slowly moving with the current. One rope was completely cut, another was hanging by a few threads, and the third was still intact but strained. I pulled hard on the intact rope, dragging the pontoon back to the dock. It took all my strength, but I managed to get it close enough to grab and tie off with new rope from my dock box. Deputy Blake came down to help me secure it properly. That was close. Another minute and it would have been halfway across the lake. "Did you guys catch him?" "Not yet. We've got units searching the area. Can you describe him?" I gave him what details I could from the video. Blake called it in on his radio, and we went back up to the house so I could show him the footage and provide a copy. 2 more deputies arrived, including Sergeant Kowalski. She looked grim as she reviewed the video on my laptop. "Mr. Paulson, I think we need to have a serious conversation about what's happening here. This has escalated from trespassing to attempted theft or destruction of property. Do you have any idea who this person might be? I've never seen him before in my life. Could he be connected to Ms. Richardson?" The thought had occurred to me, but I did not want to make accusations without proof. "I don't know. It's possible, but I can't say for sure." Sergeant Kowalski made some notes. "We're going to increase patrols in this area tonight. I want you to keep all your security footage backed up. And if you see anything else suspicious, call immediately. Don't try to confront anyone yourself." The deputies spent another hour searching the area and taking statements. They found the bolt cutters the man had dropped on my dock and bagged them as evidence. By the time everyone left, it was nearly 4 in the morning. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, watching the security camera feeds on my laptop. Every shadow seemed sinister. Every small sound made me jump. When dawn finally broke, I went down to inspect the damage. The mooring lines would need to be replaced, and there were some scratches on the dock railing where the bolt cutters had scraped. But the pontoon itself was undamaged. It could have been so much worse. Around 9 in the morning, Deputy Chen called me. "Mr. Paulson, we need you to come down to the station. We've got some developments in your case." At the sheriff's office, I was led into a small conference room where Deputy Chen and Sergeant Kowalski were waiting with another man in a suit who introduced himself as Detective Robert Morrison from the Criminal Investigations Division. "Mr. Paulson, we apprehended the individual from last night about an hour ago," Detective Morrison said. "His name is Craig Jennings. He's a handyman who does work around Lake Norman. When we questioned him, he admitted that he was hired to cut your boat loose." My stomach dropped. "Hired? By who?" "He claims he was contacted by a woman who offered him $500 cash to cut the mooring lines and let the boat drift away. She told him the boat was abandoned and that you were refusing to move it, and she just wanted to teach you a lesson. He says he never got her name, just communicated with her through text messages, and she left the cash in an envelope under a rock at the Lake Norman State Park entrance. Let me guess. The phone number was a burner? Yep, dead end. But we're pulling cell tower data to see what phones were in that area when the money was dropped. And we're going to compare Mr. Jennings' phone records to see if we can establish any connection to Ms. Richardson. It was her. I know it was her. Probably, Sergeant Kowalski agreed. But we need proof. Mr. Jennings is being charged with attempted theft and criminal trespass. If we can prove Ms. Richardson hired him, she'll be charged as an accessory in conspiracy. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Paulson, I want you to understand something. This woman is dangerous. She's escalating. First trespassing, then tampering, now hiring someone to destroy your property. People like this, when they feel like they're losing control, they don't typically de-escalate on their own. What are you saying? I'm saying be very careful. We're going to do everything we can to build a case against her, but these things take time. In the meantime, keep your security systems running, vary your routine, and don't go anywhere alone with her or engage with her directly. I left the sheriff's office feeling like I had stumbled into some kind of crime thriller instead of a simple HOA dispute about a boat. How had things gotten so completely out of control? When I got home, there were 3 news vans parked on my street. Apparently, word had gotten out about the attempted boat theft and the HOA connection. A reporter spotted me and rushed over with a cameraman. Mr. Paulson, is it true that your HOA president is being investigated for hiring someone to destroy your boat? No comment, I said, pushing past them. Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? What message does this send to other homeowners dealing with HOA disputes? I made it into my house and closed the door, but they stayed outside. My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters wanting interviews, neighbors wanting to know what was going on, even a producer from a cable news show asking if I wanted to tell my story on air. I turned my phone to silent and closed all the blinds. I just wanted this nightmare to be over. The next day, Margaret Whitfield called from the HOA board. Keith, the board met in emergency session last night. Brenda has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Her access to HOA accounts and records has been suspended, and she's been removed from all decision-making authority. I want to apologize on behalf of the board for how out of hand this got. Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that. We're also formally withdrawing all violations and fines against you. Your boat is fine, your lake access is fine, everything is fine. And we're going to be reviewing all of our policies to make sure nothing like this can happen again. What about Brenda's position as president? That will depend on what happens with the criminal charges. But frankly, even if she's not charged with anything, I don't think she'll have support from the community to continue. This has been a wake-up call for a lot of people about how toxic she's been. Over the next week, things slowly started to calm down. The news vans left after a few days when no new developments emerged. The sheriff's department continued their investigation, pulling phone records and security camera footage from around the neighborhood and the state park. I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. I worked during the day, took the pontoon out a couple of times to prove that no one was going to intimidate me away from enjoying my boat, and gradually relaxed a bit as more time passed without incident. Then, 2 weeks after the attempted boat theft, Detective Morrison called with news. Mr. Paulson, we've got her. Cell tower records show Brenda Richardson's phone was at the Lake Norman State Park entrance at the exact time the cash drop occurred. We also found text messages on Craig Jennings' phone that, while they came from a burner number, contain language and phrasing that matches emails Ms. Richardson sent to other HOA members. And we found the burner phone itself in a trash can 2 blocks from her house. Her fingerprints are on it. So you're arresting her? We're executing a warrant this afternoon. She'll be charged with conspiracy to commit theft, solicitation of criminal mischief, and criminal trespass. The DA is also considering additional charges related to filing a false police report and abuse of her HOA position. What happens now? She'll be arraigned, probably post-bail, and then we go through the court process. With the evidence we have, I'd be surprised if she doesn't take a plea deal. But that's up to the DA and her lawyer. That afternoon, I watched from my window as sheriff's deputies arrived at Brenda's house. This time, they led her out in handcuffs. She was wearing a beige pantsuit and sunglasses, her face stony. A few neighbors had come out to watch, and I could see people recording on their phones. The local news led with the story that night. Former HOA president arrested in bizarre boat sabotage case. They showed footage of Brenda being led to the patrol car, then cut to an interview with the sheriff explaining the charges. My name was mentioned, but thankfully they did not show my house or interview me. The next day, the HOA board held a community meeting. Over 100 residents showed up, far more than had ever attended a regular meeting. Margaret Whitfield, now acting president, stood at the front of the Lake Norman Yacht Club community room and addressed the crowd. I want to start by apologizing to Keith Paulson and to all of you for the failure of leadership that allowed this situation to develop, Margaret said, her voice steady but clearly emotional. The HOA exists to maintain our community and protect property values, not to harass homeowners or enable personal vendettas. We failed in that mission and we're committed to doing better. There was scattered applause. Margaret continued, outlining a series of reforms the board was implementing. More transparency in enforcement decisions, clearer appeal processes, term limits for board possessions, and regular community input sessions. It all sounded good, but I would believe it when I saw it. After the meeting, dozens of neighbors came up to me to express support or apologize for not speaking up earlier. Tom Henderson clapped me on the shoulder. "You did what a lot of us didn't have the guts to do. You stood up to her." "I just wanted to keep my boat," I said with a weak smile. "Well, you did more than that. You freed this whole neighborhood from a tyrant." The court process moved surprisingly quickly. Brenda's lawyer negotiated a plea deal. She pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit theft and 1 count of criminal trespass. The other charges were dropped. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for my damaged mooring lines and the cost of the additional security equipment I had installed, which came to about $3,000. She was also permanently banned from holding any HOA position in North Carolina and required to undergo counseling for what the judge called control and boundary issues. At the sentencing hearing which I attended, Brenda stood before the judge looking diminished and angry. Her lawyer had encouraged her to make a statement of apology, but she could barely choke out the words. "I apologize for my actions. I let my dedication to community standards cloud my judgment. I never intended for anyone to be harmed or for things to escalate as they did." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Rosewood, did not look impressed. "Mrs. Richardson, you didn't let dedication cloud your judgment. You engaged in a sustained campaign of harassment and then criminal activity against a neighbor because he dared to disagree with you. You abused a position of trust in your community, you wasted law enforcement resources, and you could have caused serious harm. You're fortunate that the state agreed to this plea deal. I hope you use your probation period to reflect seriously on your behavior and get the help you need." Brenda said nothing, just nodded stiffly. As we left the courthouse, Brenda's eyes met mine for just a moment. There was no apology there, no recognition of wrongdoing, just resentment and anger. I realized that, even after everything, she still believed she had been in the right. I did not care anymore. It was over. Back home, life gradually returned to normal. The HOA dropped all the violations. Margaret and the reformed board were actually pleasant to deal with. They even apologized for some of the more ridiculous rules that Brenda had pushed through, and began a process of revising the community bylaws to make them more reasonable. Brenda put her house on the market 2 months later. I saw the for sale sign go up and felt a sense of relief. The house sold quickly and she moved away. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she relocated to Florida. I hoped the people there were ready for her, but mostly I just hoped I never saw her again. My pontoon boat remained securely tied to my dock, where it belonged. I took it out almost every weekend that summer, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends or family. Every time I untied those ropes and fired up the engine, I felt a small sense of victory. Tom Henderson and some other neighbors and I formed a kind of informal community watch after everything that happened. We looked out for each other, reported genuine problems, and pushed back against any attempts to return to the oppressive enforcement culture that Brenda had created. The HOA actually became what it was supposed to be, a group of neighbors working together to maintain a nice community. I even started dating someone I met at one of the reformed HOA meetings. Her name was Lisa Chen, and she had just moved into the neighborhood. She thought the whole boat saga was hilarious and occasionally joked about it. "So you're telling me I'm dating a local celebrity? The man who defeated the HOA Karren? I didn't defeat anyone," I would say. "I just refused to be bullied." "That's the same thing," she would reply with a smile. One evening in late August, I was sitting on my dock watching the sunset with Lisa. The pontoon bobbed gently beside us, and the lake was peaceful. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and a light breeze rippled across the water. "This is why I bought this place," I said, gesturing at the scene before us. "This peace, this view, the ability to just be here without someone constantly telling me I'm doing something wrong." Lisa leaned against my shoulder. "You earned it. This peace, I mean. You fought for it." "I guess I did." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the tree line. Somewhere across the lake, I could hear the faint sound of another boat's engine and the laughter of people enjoying a summer evening. It was exactly what life in a lakefront community should be. The legal case against Craig Jennings, the handyman Brenda had hired, concluded around the same time. He received a lighter sentence than Brenda because he cooperated fully with the investigation and showed genuine remorse. 6 months in county jail with credit for time served, followed by probation. He had to pay restitution as well, though his portion was smaller since he was essentially a pawn in Brenda's scheme. In September, the HOA held its annual election for board positions. Margaret Whitfield ran for president officially and won in a landslide. 2 other reasonable, level-headed neighbors joined the board as well. The election had the highest turnout in the community's history. People had learned the hard way that you ignore HOA politics at your peril. At the first meeting under the new board, Margaret presented a revised set of community guidelines. They were 20 pages instead of 73. They focused on genuine community concerns like property maintenance, noise levels, and shared resource management. Gone were the absurd regulations about dock light color temperatures, boat cover specifications, and the Byzantine violation and appeal processes that Brenda had installed. The community voted to approve the new guidelines unanimously. I also did something I never thought I would do. I volunteered to join the Architectural Review Committee. Not because I wanted power or to enforce rules, but because I wanted to make sure that no one else would be put through what I had experienced. I wanted to be a voice for reasonableness and common sense. As the months passed and the seasons changed, the whole incident began to feel like a strange dream. Had it really happened? Had my HOA president really hired someone to sabotage my boat? It seemed absurd in retrospect, but the security footage and court records proved it was all too real. I did interviews with a couple of local news stations and even a national homeowner advocacy group that was documenting HOA abuses around the country. My story became a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when HOA boards operate without accountability, and when one person is given too much unchecked power. The funny thing was, through all of it, my pontoon boat just sat there on my dock, peacefully bobbing in the water, completely oblivious to the chaos it had inadvertently caused. It was just a boat, a simple, ordinary pontoon boat that I enjoyed taking out on the lake. But it had become a symbol of something larger: the right to enjoy your own property without unreasonable interference, the importance of standing up to bullies, and the power of community when people finally decide to pay attention. One Saturday in October, I organized a neighborhood boat party. About 15 families came out with their various boats, kayaks, and paddleboards. We rafted up in a quiet cove, shared food and drinks, and just enjoyed being on the water together. It was the kind of community building that should have been happening all along. Tom Henderson raised a beer and a toast to Keith Paulson and his pontoon boat, the boat that launched 1,000 news stories and freed us all from the tyranny of the HOA Karren. Everyone laughed and raised their drinks. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but I appreciated the sentiment. To reasonable HOA boards, I countered, and to neighbors who look out for each other. Hear, hear, someone called out, and we all drank to that. As the sun set that evening and everyone headed back to their docks, I took my time, enjoying the last light of day on the water. Lisa was beside me, her feet propped up on the pontoon's railing, looking completely content. "You know what the best part of all this is?" she asked. "What's that?" "You won. Not just the legal case, but the bigger picture. You stood up for what was right. You didn't back down when someone tried to intimidate you, and you helped change an entire community for the better. That's pretty rare." I thought about that as I steered the pontoon back toward my dock. She was right in a way, but it had never felt like winning, not really. It had felt like survival, like doing what I had to do to protect my home and my peace of mind. But maybe that was what winning looked like sometimes. Not a grand victory with fireworks and celebration, but simply the ability to live your life the way you wanted to live it. To enjoy a boat on a lake on a Saturday afternoon, to sit on your dock and watch the sunset without fear of harassment or retaliation. If that was winning, then yes, I had won. As I tied up the pontoon that evening, using the new heavy-duty marine rope I had installed after the incident, I paused to appreciate how solid and secure everything felt. The knots were tight, the cleats were strong, and the boat was exactly where it belonged. I locked the gate behind me with a new combination lock that only I knew the code to. The security guards watched silently from their positions, recording everything. Not because I was paranoid, but because I had learned the hard way that documentation and evidence mattered. Walking back up to my house, I could see the warm glow of lights from the windows. Inside, Lisa was making dinner, probably something delicious that would taste even better eaten on the back deck overlooking the lake. My life was good, my home was mine, and my boat was safe. Brenda Richardson was gone, her power broken, her reputation destroyed by her own actions. The legal system had worked eventually. The community had woken up and demanded better. And I had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be pushed around. The next spring, on the anniversary of the day when Brenda first appeared on my dock with her clipboard, I did something symbolic. I took the pontoon out by myself, motored to the middle of Lake Norman, and just sat there for a while, engine off, floating in the sunshine. The water lapped gently against the pontoons. A fish jumped somewhere nearby. A few other boats passed in the distance, their occupants waving. It was perfect. I thought about everything that had happened, about how a simple dispute over a boat had spiraled into criminal charges and court cases and community upheaval. It all seemed so unnecessary. If Brenda had just been reasonable, if she had just followed proper procedures, if she had just treated me like a neighbor instead of an enemy, none of it would have happened. But people like Brenda exist, and they seek out positions of power in HOAs and other community organizations precisely because they thrive on control. They see themselves as guardians of standards, protectors of property values, enforcers of order. They never see themselves as the tyrants they actually are. The only defense against people like that is vigilance, participation, accountability. The people who lived in shoreline estates had learned that lesson the hard way, but at least they had learned it. The new HOA board was proof of that. As I fired up the pontoon and headed back to my dock, I felt genuinely at peace for the first time in over a year. The nightmare was over, life could continue, and it did. The seasons turned, winter came and went. The HOA functioned smoothly under Margaret's leadership. Property values actually increased once word got out that the community had reformed and become more livable. Several new families moved in, attracted by the lakefront location and the reasonable HOA policies. I served on the Architectural Review Committee for 2 years before stepping down, confident that the culture had changed enough that my presence was no longer necessary. Lisa and I got engaged on my dock at sunset, with the pontoon bobbing happily beside us. We talked about starting a family, about building a life together in this community that had been through so much but had come out stronger. The pontoon boat, the catalyst for everything, continued to serve its original purpose. It took us fishing, it hosted small parties, it provided a platform for lazy afternoons reading in the sun. It was just a boat, an inanimate object, but it represented something important to me. The principle that your property is your property, and that living in an HOA community should not mean surrendering your rights or your dignity. Years later, when people would ask me about what happened, I would tell them the whole story, every detail. Not because I enjoyed reliving it, but because I thought it was important for people to understand how easily things could go wrong when power went unchecked and when people remained silent in the face of injustice. So what's the lesson? Someone asked me once at a neighborhood barbecue. I thought about it for a moment before answering. The lesson is that you can't just assume someone else will fix things. You can't hope that unreasonable people will suddenly become reasonable. If something is wrong, if someone is abusing their power, you have to stand up and do something about it. Document everything, follow the proper channels, and don't back down just because it gets uncomfortable. That sounds exhausting. It is, I admitted, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is living under someone else's thumb, losing your freedom piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize you're not really living in your own home anymore. You're living in someone else's vision of what your home should be, and that's no way to live. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I stood there for a moment, looking down toward the lake where my pontoon was moored. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and pink. Everything was as it should be. Brenda Richardson never returned to North Carolina, as far as I knew. Her probation was eventually completed, and she disappeared from everyone's radar. Sometimes I wondered if she ever understood what she had done wrong. If she ever had a moment of genuine self-reflection and realized that her obsession with control had destroyed her reputation, her standing in the community, and had led to criminal charges and a permanent mark on her record. Probably not, I thought. People like that rarely change. They just move on to a new community, a new position of minor power, and the cycle begins again. I hoped that whoever lived near her in Florida was paying attention, but that was not my problem anymore. My problem had been solved. Definitively and completely, the boat remained. The dock stood strong, the HOA was reasonable, and life went on the way it always does, one peaceful sunset at a time on the shores of Lake Norman. I took the pontoon out one more time before winter set in. Just a solo cruise around the lake to close out the season. The water was cold, the air crisp, and the trees on shore had turned brilliant shades of red and gold. As I idled past the other docks in shoreline estates, I saw neighbors waving, saw other boats being prepared for winter storage, saw a community that was functioning the way it should. When I tied up at my dock for the last time that season, I spent a few extra minutes making sure everything was secure. The mooring lines were strong, the boat cover was properly fitted, the gate was locked, and the security cameras were watching, always watching, just in case. But I did not think I would need them anymore. The threat had passed, the community had changed, and my simple, ordinary pontoon boat could go back to being what it was always meant to be. Just a boat, a vessel for enjoyment and relaxation, nothing more and nothing less. As I walked back to the house, I took one last look over my shoulder at the lake. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new concerns, new moments of joy and frustration. But tonight, everything was perfect. The battle was won, the war was over, and peace had returned to shoreline estates. And in the end, that was all I had ever wanted. To live quietly by the lake with my boat tied safely to my dock, free from harassment, free from false accusations, free from the petty tyranny of someone who confused authority with righteousness. It was a simple desire, but it had required extraordinary effort to achieve. That was the reality of living in an HOA community, I supposed. Simple desires often required extraordinary effort, but it was worth it. Every moment of stress, every legal fee, every sleepless night worrying about what Brenda might do next, all of it was worth it to arrive at this moment of perfect peace. My home was truly mine again, my life was my own. And my pontoon boat, the innocent catalyst for everything, bobbed gently on the dark water, secure and safe at last. The lights in my house glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. Lisa was inside, probably wondering where I had gone. I smiled and headed up the path, leaving the lake behind until tomorrow, when I could start another day in paradise, another day of the life I had fought so hard to protect. The story of Keith Paulson versus the HOA became a legend in Shoreline Estates, told to new residents as both a warning and an inspiration. It was a reminder that communities are shaped by the people who live in them, for better or worse. It was proof that one person standing up could make a difference. And it was a testament to the simple truth that sometimes the most important battles are fought not over grand principles, but over simple things like the right to keep a boat at your own dock without being harassed. As I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, I left the darkness and the memories outside where they belonged. Inside was warmth, light, love, and the future. Outside was the past, resolved and finished, and that was exactly how it should be. The pontoon boat remained on the dock through the winter, covered and protected, waiting for spring when it would once again fulfill its purpose of providing joy and relaxation on the beautiful waters of Lake Norman. And this time, nothing and no one would interfere with that simple pleasure. Not the HOA, not Brenda Richardson, not anyone. That was my victory, hard won but absolute. And as I sat down to dinner with Lisa that evening, sharing stories about our day and planning for our future, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that I had not just won a legal battle or defeated a bully. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my peace of mind. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered.